Thanks to the folks who led the way. Thanks to the folks, let us thank them every day.
And today's show is one of my Inspirational Lives shows dedicated to John Lewis. He's certainly an American icon, and his history of fighting for civil rights goes back to the 1950s. And today I want to draw some attention to the struggles that he was involved with. And John Lewis was quite a lighthearted guy sometimes, and he would often tell his stories, especially when he was campaigning, of when he was a kid, and he always wanted to be a preacher. So he'd practice with the chickens that they had on his farm, and he'd preach away and telling them the stories of the Bible. It got to a point where his assistants that worked with him throughout the years in Congress would start to laugh when he'd start telling that story to a new audience. It's probably a good place to begin his story, a youngster preaching to the farm animals. Well, John Lewis was a very dedicated student. The only problem was growing up on a farm in the South, there were times when there was planting and harvesting. His father would expect him to be in the fields helping and told him he wouldn't be able to go to school. Well, John was a little quick on his feet, and he'd hide under the porch until the school bus came by, and when it stopped, he'd run out there and jump on and get to school and learn as much as he could. By the time he was a freshman in high school, a decision from the Supreme Court came down, and that's when the Supreme Court handed down their decision about school desegregation. And John was pretty excited. This decision that said the doctrine of separate but equal was unconstitutional. Well, John thought, oh, this is going to be great. He's going to go to a state-of-the-art school and ride a state-of-the-art bus, and things are going to really improve now that he could go to a regular high school and not one that was segregated. Well, little did he know this wasn't going to happen overnight, and often things don't. I must share with you a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you today came from John Lewis's book called March. And there's actually 3 graphic novel books, and they're really pretty good. You should check them out. It's called March. In 1959, John Lewis was involved with the lunch counter protest in Nashville. And after he attended some nonviolent training sessions, they took it upon themselves to integrate the lunch counters in Nashville. It wasn't a pretty sight, and it was a tough go. But even in those days, I think John Lewis believed that one of these days things are going to get better if we put our minds to it, and if we can convince others that this was the just thing to do. Then he believed that one day segregation would no longer be the policies throughout the South and even in the North. One of the early things that he took part in was as a member of the Freedom Riders, and certainly their lives were at risk a number of times. I'm sure that some of those moments when he was curled up and being beaten, times when he had to convince himself that as scary as it is, I need to do it, I need to be a part of this group that's trying to change things. In the summer of 1963, John Lewis, he had an opportunity to speak just before Martin Luther King during the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom. One of the major opportunities that he had to share his ideas and what the people marching for civil rights were trying to do. I'd just like to say thank you to all those folks for all their efforts that they made to bring justice and bring about some change. Well, there's just so much to John Lewis's life that I'm not even going to be able to hit on today. I certainly don't want to forget to mention the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, where he was almost beaten to death as they tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But he survived that, damaged pretty severely, but he survived that and later ran for Congress and served there almost 34 years in the House of Representatives.
One of these days, we're gonna find a better way. One of these days, we're
gonna find a better way. One of these days, one of these days, one of these days, we're gonna find a better way.